And we're probably not going to be cheering.
But Europe cannot stay problems.
Let's set the record straight. There's no argument of which.
Heinous assassination.
A series of deliberate and deadly.
Have you ever seen an attractive woman defend Luigi Mangione? This is a real question for you, audience. I'm here to deliver facts. I'm here to speak the truth to you because I, unlike all the people out there, unlike all the other streamers, all the other influencers, I love you, okay? I love you so much. I'm here for you. I'm here to form a parasocial relationship with you, actually. I'm here because I want to be your big brother, okay? I want you to view me as a big brother. I'm here to guide you through life. I'm here to help you debunk dumb statistics, okay? So when you go back to college, when you go back to high school, however so old you are, okay? When you go back to work and your dumbass coworkers are trying to tell you something or another about right-wing terrorism, after you just saw Charlie Kirk get shot, you'll be able to debunk it. You'll be able to say, no, that's not correct. You'll be, actually, put on your nerd glasses for a second. And you'll be able to debunk whatever nonsense they're telling you, okay? So today's topic is left-wing terrorism in this country. I think we might have already screwed this whole video up, guys. I think YouTube might take this down. We've mentioned terrorism probably within the first 2 minutes. I'm not sure exactly, right? In light of recent events, you are no doubt aware of the slew of left-wing terror attacks that have taken place over the course of 2025, notably kind of starting off with a lot of anti-Tesla vandalism, which we saw across the country, Tesla dealerships being burnt and Tesla cars being vandalized. And then we saw, of course, most recently the Charlie Kirk shooting, as well as the shooting of a church in Minnesota. And very, very recently, we saw an anti-ICE shooting as well, in which only migrants were killed. Also, I'm not making light of that. I'm simply pointing out the irony of the attempted shoot. When confronted with these acts of terror, whether it be the Tesla vandalism or whether it be the BLM riots or whether it be anti-ICE shootings, how has the right responded? Certainly, yes, with calls for justice and retribution, but only through legal channels, typically. Yeah, of course, you're always going to have someone on the fringe who calls for actual retribution. But the reality is that, by and large, the right responded with calls for justice, with calls for the FBI and the government to step in, and with prayer vigils, where they prayed not only for Charlie Kirk, not only for ICE agents, not only for the different people who could potentially be harmed, their property be harmed in Tesla vandalism, not only for those people, but also for the perpetrators. And how has the left responded? Well, at best, people on the left have responded dismissively. At best, people on the left say, well, no one deserves to be a victim of gun violence, as though gun violence is just something that happens. As though gun violence, I was just a victim of gun violence. There's no perpetrator, there's no crime. Gun violence, it's like getting struck by lightning. You were a victim of gun violence. At the worst, people on the left have reacted by saying that Charlie deserved it. They've reacted by saying that you deserve it for holding the same opinions as he does. They've reacted maybe somewhere more in between where they say, well, look, I condemn the act, but Charlie Kirk was still a horrible person. Still imply that he had it coming, that he reaped what he sowed. And these different opinions are usually backed up with some type of graph, usually one of the three you'll see right next to me here. It's backed up by one of those graphs that will say, actually, right-wingers commit most of the terrorism in this country. Don't believe your eyes. Don't believe what you see every day in and out. Don't believe what has basically been the commonly confirmed perception over the past few years, where the only thing they seem to be able to bring up is January 6th. Don't believe any of that. Believe us. Believe these abstracted studies which tell you that right-wingers typically commit about 4 times more terrorism, that they're responsible for like 400 terror deaths, that they're responsible for thousands of terror incidents, and so on and so forth. Today, dear viewer, we're going to be debunking those statistics. The first study we're going to be going over is the Cato Institute study made by a man named Alex Nowritza. Alex Nowritza is a libertarian. Cato Institute is a libertarian think tank. And that might fool you into thinking that this is a study that would, if anything, be biased towards the right wing. It's important to remember in this that the Cato Institute is not exactly, your sort of typical anti-SJW type of libertarians. These are the type of libertarians which are quite pro-mass migration. These are the type of libertarians which are, quite socially liberal, even beyond just let them live, let them do them, actively promoting many of these causes. And so I would argue that Alex, who is, if you check his Twitter, is no fan of the Trump administration, has every reason to still be biased against the right wing in his study. The second study we're going to be looking at is the CSIS study, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. We're going to be looking at that study, pointing out some of the flaws in it. And the final study we'll be going over is the ADL study. And we're going to start by disputing the methodology and the definitions that he uses. So firstly, Alex only includes killings. So already we have a question of how much effectiveness plays a role here. Your average leftist, can't shoot a gun, a little puny, post the black square on their Instagram, can't talk to women, the kind of person. That person, goes up, tries to shoot somebody, is unsuccessful. Is that a problem? I would say it is. Misses by a mile. I would say that is still a problem, even if they miss. I don't want someone shooting at me even if they miss. But that's not counted. Only deaths are counted. So already with this, we have an issue of counting only things that are effective. So obviously, right-wingers who are maybe more likely to be in the gym, more likely to have shot guns, more likely to have backgrounds in hunting and other such areas, more likely to be from rural areas, those people are much more likely to be effective at committing terrorism. And so therefore, we're already running into an issue where we begin to classify incidents by killings alone, where we're going to be gauging by their actual effectiveness and not by whether there was just an incident of terror. Secondly, Alex counts people like Elliot Rodger towards right-wing totals. He counts incels towards right-wing totals. I will grant that sometimes incel killings are kind of motivated by this underlying misogyny that could technically be classified as right-wing. But in the case of Elliot Rodger, I think it's very fair to say that the man did not have that many right-wing views. He was just a twerp who hated life. I don't even think he killed a single woman. I might be wrong about that. I think he killed his 2 roommates. So should he really count? I don't know. But we're already on a flimsy basis right here when we begin counting people like Elliot Rodger and people who are not necessarily motivated by any type of pure right-wing ideology, but are only motivated by things that might adjacently be considered right-wing. Secondly, Alex also includes acts of foreign terror. Now, what do I mean by that? Between the 1970s and 1990s, there were approximately 11 attacks committed by Cuban refugees, predominantly against other Cubans who were affiliated with the Castro regime. These attacks are anti-communist by nature, but I would say it's pretty unfair to consider those things as being a part of contemporary American political dynamics. Refugees that we let into this country, killing other refugees that we left into this country, doesn't really have much to do with whether the Republican Party or the Democratic Party is promoting violence. And I do not think that those are really relevant to discussing modern American political dynamics. And thirdly, and now we're going to get to the really egregious stuff, mass casualty events. So if Alex only counted all events regardless of their scale, then Islamic terror would make up about 83% of all killings. Alex, and I agree with him on this, decides to discard 9/11 because 9/11 is a mass casualty event. It's an outlier, and it doesn't tell us much about actual trends. About 5,000 people died during 9/11. However, Alex also arbitrarily excludes Jonestown from the left-wing total. Jonestown, a event caused by a leftist cult, as you might know, gets excluded from the left-wing total based upon the pedantic and honestly disgusting reasoning that technically they fled to Guyana before the killing happened. Before they executed 900 people, they fled to another country, so technically it didn't happen on American soil, and technically it can't be counted to the left-wing total, even though in a single stroke it would add 900 victims to left-wing total and eclipse the entirety of the right-wing total. This is in spite of the fact that he does count Oklahoma City, an act carried out by Timothy McVeigh, towards the right-wing total. Now we can get into the conspiracy theories later, but let's keep it surface level here. Okay. Timothy McVeigh, Oklahoma City. He counts that, but he does not count Jonestown. He does not count 9/11. So the only one of the 3 largest mass casualty events in American history that is counted is Oklahoma City, adding about 130 victims to the right-wing total, in spite of the fact that Jonestown, which 900 victims is not counted, and 9/11 with its 5,000 victims is not counted. That's disgraceful, that's disgusting, and it is an obvious inflation of the right-wing total. And so already we're on shaky ground, right? Already we've seen that there are basic methodological errors with the study. We've seen that Alex is willing to discard left-wing terror incidents based on pedantic and strange reasoning. We've seen that. But could it really get any worse? Oh, it could. Oh, it could. And that brings us to the blatant examples of unequal treatment in this study, of incidents which were counted as right-wing when a parallel incident was not counted as left-wing, often being omitted altogether. So what are a few examples of this? Well, got my handy little list here. And full credit to Jennifer42 on Substack for compiling a list of these different omissions and miscategorizations. My first example is Devin Patrick Kelly versus Robert Long. Now, Devin Patrick Kelly was a militant atheist, okay? He had a social media page that looked like it was out of TJ Kirk's sex tape, okay? Filled with anti-Christian memes and atheist memes. It looks like he had just watched his first ever Richard Dawkins debate, okay? He looks like he hate masturbates to a picture of Ken Ham, all right? This guy was an atheist to his core. And, tragically, he went and shot up the Sutherland Springs Church and killed 23 people, including family members. Does Alex count this towards left-wing total? This obvious act of anti-Christian hatred, despite saying that he does count anti-Christian hatred as left-wing? No, he doesn't. Alex counts it as a personal grievance. It was a personal grievance. The shooter had a personal grievance against his own mother and just decided to shoot up the church in retaliation against her. Now, I could forgive this. I really could. I really could. I get wanting to dot your I's and cross your T's. I get wanting to make sure that you cover all your possible bases. What I don't get, however, is Alex's treatment of the Robert Long case in light of his treatment of the Devin Kelly case. For context, Robert Long was a man who shot up an Asian spa where he frequented prostitutes. He was a Christian, and he shot up the spa over fears over his own sexual purity, over deep anxiety about his own sexual purity. Alex categorized this as a right-wing killing, despite having no Christian nationalist undertones. There was simply a religious element. So, when atheism is involved in an attack, Alex dismisses it. Oh, it's a personal grievance. You can't really take into account someone's private views when there's a personal grievance involved. However, when we see no elements of Christian nationalist ideology in a terror attack, when we see no elements of a broader political motivation, Alex feels free to go ahead and categorize that as a right-wing attack because Christianity is inherently right-wing. You can't do that, Alex. You can't do that. You have to pick one. Either you take into account someone's personal affiliations, or you don't. Either you take into account someone's private religious beliefs, or you don't, and you only look at the strict motive for the crime. And if you look at the strict motive for the Robert Long case, it should not be counted as right-wing. And if you look at the strict motive for the Devin Kelly case, it really should be counted as left-wing, but for sake of argument, we'll go with the personal grievance argument. My second example is sadly one that you're probably all too familiar with. Recently, on a Charlotte subway, a woman named Irina Zertutska was attacked by a brutal thug named DeCarlos Brown Jr. DeCarlos slit her throat and said, quote, "I got that white girl." All the while ignoring everyone else on the subway who just so happened to be black. Alex does not count this as a racial killing and therefore not as a left-wing killing, because those words alone are not enough to indicate that it was based solely on her race. However, when a man named George A. Bush said a racial slur during a murder which is otherwise unproven to be racially motivated, Alex uses that as a reason to go ahead and classify that as a right-wing murder. I would let that stand if it were not, once again, for the DeCarlos Brown Jr. case. If it were not for the DeCarlos Brown Jr. case, because it is a blatant double standard. Either a single racialized statement is enough to make a crime count as being left-wing or right-wing, or it isn't. Either saying, I got that white girl, or saying a racial slur during a murder is enough to make a crime count as a racial murder, or it isn't. But you can't say both. You can't say one, but not the other. You can't do that, Alex. Once again, you can't do that. My third example is the Santino Lagan case versus the Anthony Nephew case. Now, who is Anthony Nephew? Anthony Nephew was a deranged man who murdered his entire family, including his 2 children, upon hearing the results of the 2024 election. Do you think Alex counts that as a left-wing killing? No. Instead, Alex claims, without evidence, that Nephew didn't like Democrats either, and therefore it cannot be counted as a left-wing murder since he's somewhat of a cafeteria extremist. He holds an eclectic set of beliefs. However, when Santino Lagan, a man who had both far-right and far-left materials, who seemed to indulge in every type of extremism, committed what seemed to be a racially charged mass shooting, Alex automatically counts that as right-wing. I would let that stand if it were not for his categorization of the Anthony Nephew case. His categorization of the Anthony Nephew case as being neither left-wing nor right-wing, as being a total thing that he can just omit, completely condemns his treatment of the Santino Lagan case. It shows that, once again, this is all just about picking and choosing. When someone has an eclectic set of beliefs and they commit a crime which can be interpreted as being right-wing, Alex immediately counts it as right-wing, no questions asked. But when someone on the other side, who supposedly, by the way, that's another important note here, supposedly does the same thing, Alex shrugs that off. He didn't like Democrats either. Once again, Alex, you can't do both. Pick one or the other. Already we're seeing this study is filled with countless cases of unequal treatment. And I still have more, by the way. I still have more. That brings me to my final example of unequal treatment in Darrell Brooks Jr. versus Robert Louis Deere. Now, Darrell Brooks Jr. was a deranged man who plowed his car through a plethora of innocent people at the Waukesha Christmas parade. He killed many people. His car had black sovereign citizens material within it. His house had black nationalists and black extremist material in it. His social media was full of anti-white vitriol. And Alex says that he counts black nationalism towards the left-wing total. So where is it? Why is this killing omitted? Well, Alex says it's because Darrell Brooks Jr. was, and I quote, crazy. And he just shrugs it off. Even though Darrell Brooks Jr. was found competent to stand trial. And sadly, I can't say the same about Robert Louis Deere, an anti-abortion crusader who shot up an abortion clinic, and who, as a result, is counted in Alex's total as being right-wing. Even though Robert Louis Deere was found incompetent to stand trial and currently resides in a mental hospital. Even though Robert Louis Deere was hearing voices at the time of the shooting. Now, if he counted all crazy people, I would have no issue with that. But he counts a man who was literally found incompetent to stand trial while dismissing Darrell Brooks Jr.'s case, even though, once again, Darrell Brooks Jr. was found competent to stand trial. Even though he was found competent to stand trial, he dismisses one case because the guy was crazy, and then includes another case where the man is currently residing in a mental hospital. Make that make sense. And so when we account for these areas of unequal treatment, when we account for miscategorization, for blatant omissions, when we account for all of that, the actual total of the Cato data set comes out to 212 left-wing killings and 159 right-wing killings. Nowhere close to what Alex said it was. Nowhere close to the about 400 right-wing killings and 30-something left-wing killings. Nowhere close to it. Now, I should add that is after we exclude all mass casualty events, all of the 3 big mass casualty events, excluding 9/11 from the Islamists, excluding Jonestown from the leftists, and Oklahoma City from the rightists. And we're not even going to get into conspiracies about Oklahoma City, believe you me. I know you know about them, viewer. Okay? I know you know. You're the type of person watching this content. I know you know about them. We can't say for certain that Alex's data set is just all wrong. Once again, I'm sourcing very heavily a person named Jennifer42 on Substack. It is very possible that Jennifer42 made some type of error in their calculations. I'm not going to dispute that. However, I think we have so much as proved that at the very least, the Cato Institute's totals are very sketchy, are based on bad methodology, and that they have several blatant double standards. And while I'm sad to say we have to leave our friend Alex behind for now and move on to the Center for Strategic and International Studies study. So, firstly, if you wanted to quote this study, it already shows a total trend reversal for 2025 anyways. It already shows that left-wing attacks have eclipsed right-wing attacks in 2025. So, it's not a good one to quote anyways. It's also worth pointing out the CSIS study predominantly classifies things by way of incidents and not just by killings. I think that's a little more fair. So I actually like this study a bit more. However, it still has its flaws. So it openly excludes Tesla vandalism and Antifa vandalism, despite both those things definitionally being terrorism. So those bombings and, arsons at Tesla dealerships that were obviously meant to coerce Elon Musk, those are simply not counted. It also classifies pro-Palestinian terrorism as ethno-nationalist as opposed to left-wing. And so I'll grant the CSIS themselves admit this might be an unfair classification. So take the case of Cody Allen Balmer, the Josh Shapiro arson, set fire to the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania. So friends told police he'd been talking to himself. There's some allegations that he's crazy. He reposted both anti-Trump and anti-Biden things. He said, quote, "Shapiro will not take part in his plans for what he wants to do to the Palestinian people." I'm going to be honest, he seems mentally unwell. It makes classifying him difficult. He has a set of eclectic beliefs. Now, I will say, ultimately, it seems to be more of a left-wing crime. Okay, that's just my opinion. I don't really care. But I do want to make the point here with Cody Allen Balmer that if the shoe were on the other foot, if this were more of an anti-Israel style, right, if they're done by a right-winger, how much doubt do you have in your mind that they would go ahead and classify this as right-wing? In spite of the eclectic. It's given what we've seen so far, even though with the Cato Institute study, do you really think they would waste their time trying to split hairs or whether this was ethno-nationalist or left-wing? Personally, I don't really think so. If you want a more blatant example of this, take the Israeli embassy shooting in New York where Elias Rodriguez killed 2 Israeli embassy staff members. He told officers he acted for Palestine and for Gaza. He was a member of the Party of Socialism and Liberation. He had a 900-word manifesto that said, "Escalate for Gaza, bring the war home." He had a GoFundMe page in 2017 which sought to raise money to pay for his way to the People's Congress of Resistance, which is to fight the Trump agenda and the Congress of Millionaires. The guy's obviously a left-winger. This is obviously a left-wing crime. It's counted as an ethno-nationalist crime. It's counted as an ethno-nationalist incident. It's counted as everything but what it obviously is. And once again, if this was a right-winger, if this was more of an anti-Israel killing, if this was something that was anti-Semitic in nature, do you really think they'd split hairs over whether or not this was an ethno-nationalist killing? I know I said that last time, but I just want to keep repeating that. Do you really think? It's because it's really ultimately about this pattern of weaponized pedanticness. When it's a left-winger, we have to split the hairs. We have to make sure we're very precise with categories. When it's a right-winger, who cares if he was right-wing or not? Who cares if he had a set of different beliefs? Who cares? All what we constantly see is that there is a very liberal attitude towards right-wing crimes, where we just treat the incident in isolation. But for left-wing crimes, we need the full context, of course. The full context. Context matters. Context matters. Disinformation. Be careful. Now, the different errors in the CSIS study, which are mostly kind of the same methodological errors, slip there, which are mostly the same methodological errors that you would see just about anywhere else, like in the Cato Institute study. They're bad. They're not the worst. I think the study is slightly better than the Cato study, but the errors they do make, I don't really think it's all their fault, because they reference, drumroll please, the ADL heat map. Oh boy. Now, you might be familiar with the ADL, and the ADL actually has a study on their own, which we're about to talk about very shortly. Look, if you're watching this video as a leftist, right, I'm sure you don't like the ADL either, right? They call everything under the sun anti-Semitic, right? If there was a coin rolling down the street and you picked it up before a Jew did, they'd probably call that anti-Semitic, right? You know, if Israel sneezed and you didn't say bless you, if the collective Jew of the world let out a big sneeze and you didn't say bless you, they'd call that anti-Semitic, right? So your anti-Zionism, you know, all that, they call that anti-Semitic too. So why you choose to trust them on this one issue when they're not reliable and you don't think they're reliable on literally anything else is beyond me. Totally beyond me. And we're gonna kind of pick up a little break here and play our favorite game. All right, for all the viewers at home, okay? I want you to do this. I want you to look at the screen on 3. I want you to say, do they count BLM? No, they don't count BLM. No, they don't. They count January 6th, though. It's very important. I don't even know what they're counting for January 6th. They're counting like 2 officers who committed suicide after the fact, and then one guy who had died of natural causes. And the only person who was actually shot and killed on January 6th was Ashley Babbitt, and that was by a police officer. So if you can figure that out for me, I'd really appreciate it. Let me know in the comments below if I'm an idiot. But I really can't see it. I mean, you know, and BLM, I mean, I really do think that should be counted, guys. Once again, call me crazy, but me personally, I just really feel that, you know, an event organized by Democratic politicians and community organizers from the BLM movement, I think that when those people start to turn violent, that there's enough basis to say that that's probably a left-wing violence incident, in my opinion. So this study has by far the most skewed proportion. It counts like 400 right-wing killings between 2012 and 2021, I believe. And there's just some very obvious issues with it. I'm going to give you a very quick rundown here of people who are not classified as left-wing killings. Luigi Mangione. He had a private grievance with the healthcare industry, and he did not have a clear pattern of left-wing views. So despite the fact that he's obviously a left-winger, he's not a left-winger. Audrey Hale, the Covenant school shooter in Tennessee. Total silence from the ADL. It's a trans shooter. I'll let you guess why they didn't count it as a left-wing incident. They did not count the recent Annabelle Hernandez shooting of a local ABC station in Sacramento. They didn't count that as left-wing because even though the guy had an anti-Trump book in his car and had other Trump cabinet officials on his hit list, he apparently didn't really have. It could be categorized as a personal grievance once again with the station. Even though he seems to be upset about the firing of Jimmy Kimmel, the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel didn't even last. Even though he seems to be upset about that, it doesn't count for some reason. Is there anything else? No, I think that's about it just for my prime examples here. But those are just some very obvious and glaring issues. But in reality, those outliers and omissions, they don't really make up the bulk of the error in the study. The bulk of the error in this study comes from a very simple fact, which is that this is the only study of the 3 which categorizes prison gang violence as being right or left wing, but only ever right wing. So violence from white supremacist prison gangs, but not from black prison gangs, is counted as being right wing. And by the way, to add insult to injury, the perpetrator only has to be right wing. So the ADL doesn't even take time to consider the fact that the motive of the crime might not be right wing in nature. Here's a few examples of that. So let's start here with an Albuquerque, New Mexico incident where 4 members of the Aryan Brotherhood were involved. An incident in Venice, Florida, where where a man beat a hotel worker to death. He was a member of nothing, actually. He just had tattoos that were Nazi related. A man named Brandon Engelman, who killed a person he had been feuding with. A man who killed someone in a room at an extended stay at a hotel, following an argument over a social media post. A killing in which two gangs got into a shootout, and a killing which was a dispute over drugs. In all of these cases, starting with the Albuquerque, New Mexico incident, well, what happened there? They actually were all in the same white supremacist gang, and they shot each other in the car. So everyone who died was a part of a white supremacist prison gang. Everyone who died was at least nominally white. But that's counted as a right-wing terror incident. Or take the Venice, Florida incident. The victim was named Tina Strader, God rest her soul, a white woman. In Fresno, California, the victim was Pacer Hampton, a white man. For the Victor Lee Thompson incident, the one that occurred at the hotel, this is the first one where it's a black person. This is the only one which I say could realistically actually be a racial killing, but it also seems to be over an argument over a social media post, so take it with a grain of salt. Or the John Hilt and Justin Murphy shooting, the one in Springfield, Missouri. Yeah, that one was actually them two rival gangs, once again. Everybody involved was a part of a white supremacist gang. And the only other one where a black person was involved, where the victim was named Darren Salam, that was apparently over drugs. Now, could it still have been racial in nature? Who really knows? But we're already on shaky grounds here. Let's just say that. So I don't want to waste too much more of your time going over this ADL study. As you can imagine, it commits just about every methodological error under the sun, especially ones we've already covered. It basically does everything the Cato study does, and as well as the CSIS study. Does all of that. Doesn't count BLM. Counts things that happened on January 6th. Counts just about everything under the sun that you could think of. I'm not going to waste your time with that. If you want to go read it for yourself, you can just go ahead and look it up. I'll put a link in the description for you. So have we proved our thesis statement? Have we proved that the left commits more terrorism? Well, let's just say it this way. If you arbitrarily discard the largest mass casualty events in American history, if you don't count forms of economic terrorism designed to coerce people, if you miscategorize several killings as right wings, if you arbitrarily omit several left-wing killings, then yeah, the left doesn't commit more terrorism. Sure. But if you are actually honest, if you actually have a good methodology, then no. There is no debate. As I said at the beginning of this video, you have to trust your eyes, American. Trust your eyes, patriot. These studies are a waste of time. And honestly, I personally believe that it's probably too difficult to actually track who's right-wing, who's left-wing, separate motive from personal affiliation, sort out the crazy people from the people who are just genuine, die-hard political radicals. It's difficult. And so these studies are always going to have some level of inflation in one way or another on one side or the other. So, what should you do? Trust your eyes. When it seems like almost every act of terror you hear about on the news, or in your Discord server, or in your group chat, when it seems like almost every act of terror that you hear about is perpetrated by a left-winger, when you watch a man get shot in the jugular live on Twitter, when you watch that, don't let yourself be gaslit. Don't let yourself feel bad for being right-wing. Don't let yourself feel bad for being American. Stand proud, stand tall, and keep on fighting. Remember, we are Charlie Kirk. We are America. Signing off. This is my very first Fireside Chat. Have you ever seen an attractive woman defend Luigi Mangione? That's a real question, by the way. I've seen women who are attractive without fathers defend Luigi Mangione. But I've never seen an attractive woman defending Luigi Mangione. It's always some chopped bitch.
All right, it's going, I think.
Thank you very much to all my adoring fans. Adoring fans.
Adoring.
Thank you very much. We can put it in like a really bad bloopers reel. Oh, this is what didn't make it into the video. Oh my goodness. Oh, I care so much. I care about the things you didn't say. I'm your adoring parasocial fan. Fuck This is actually my second take for this video, by the way. I was noticing that I was having trouble making eye contact with the camera, and it was kind of giving Tylenol American. So I had to tone it down a little bit. I have to keep my eyes on the camera. I'm keeping my eyes on you. I love you, okay? That's why we're locking eyes right now. I want you to lock eyes with me, okay?
End video.